It's my great pleasure to be speaking to the CEO of the Nova Cinema, Kristian Connelly. And it's important to note the award-winning Nova Cinema has been going now for over 30 years. And Kristian, you've been part of the Nova for what, 15 years?
Yeah, that's correct, Peter. Just over 15 years. I'll be heading into this is my 16th year. So I will have completed 16 years by March of next year. So at that point, I will have been in charge for over half of its running time, which is kind of surprising to me to think about, but certainly don't regret it.
Well, look, congratulations on that longevity and obviously success, because if we're looking at over the last 12 months, my impression is that audiences are flocking back to the Nova, and that the 16 screens are progressing well.
Yeah, that is probably broadly correct. What we've had to deal with in the last, say, 12 months is a bit of an inconsistency of product. We started off the year very, very strongly with some terrific films that were a part of the 2022 award season. Thinking back to those films, we're thinking about things like Tar, which starred Cate Blanchett. The Whale. Also, we had a couple of sort of mid-range hits in there. There was a movie with Tom Hanks called My Name is Otto, a man called Otto, I should say. So there was a couple of sort of mid films and a couple of very big films. We had a lot of success with a film called After Sun, starring Paul Mescal, which he was nominated for an Academy Award. And then we had the Ari Aster film, which came along in April, Beau is Afraid, which was quite a divisive sort of daylight horror, if you will, not dissimilar from his film Midsummer. And then we obviously had the mid-year phenomena of Barbenheimer. And then just in the last couple of weeks, particularly, we've had a lot of really strong films coming through. And I'm thinking of films like Saltburn, which has been really successful, Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon, as well as the Wes Anderson film Asteroid City, among others. So, yeah, it's been a bit of a roller coaster, if you will, but things seem to be looking very good for the next couple of months. And obviously, we get to see what happens with the outcomes of the various strikes that occurred over 2023. But on the most part, I think it's pretty positive.
That is great to hear. I'll ask you about your best films of the year and what's coming up at the Nova shortly. But I wanted to ask you first, in terms of selecting films for the Nova Cinema, do you have a sort of overarching philosophy or approach that you take?
Look, I think so. I mean, I suppose it's all a matter of perspective. There was somebody who made a comment to us through one of our Contact Us portals not so long ago, kind of criticizing us and saying, that you're not playing the films that you used to play. You're playing a lot more. I think the words they used were virtue signaling films and stuff like that. And I really kind of, I was a bit surprised by the comment, to say the least, but upon reflection, and I've thought about it a lot, I thought about it a great deal. I didn't respond to the person directly because I didn't think that there was very much that I would necessarily want to put in print, so to speak, to somebody who was sort of very critical, because I don't think people really understand the minutiae that goes into running a place like this, and the amount of thinking and consideration that goes into it. But yeah, I suppose upon reflection, what they accused us of was probably not incorrect, but I suppose I would look at it in as much as it's not that we've necessarily changed what we're putting on screen, but rather what is being brought to us to put on screen has changed. I made a comment to somebody the other day. I said, Harvey Weinstein's in jail. Ishmael Merchant is dead, as is Agnes Varda, and probably most of the major European filmmakers of the 20th century. So, looking back and sort of thinking, oh, well, where are the movies that I used to enjoy, say, 15 years ago? Those movies don't exist. I mean, even Asian cinema has evolved tremendously. We've seen the rise of Korean cinema in the last couple of years. We've seen the crossover with Western culture in many respects and Asian cinema. Right now, we're going through this remarkable kind of surge of interest in Japanese cinema with both Miyazaki's The Boy and the Heron, which is our current top film at the box office, as well as the global success of Godzilla Minus One. And then, also because of the proliferation of film festivals at cinemas around the country, what we're sort of seeing is a ghettoization of titles from certain countries being kind of funneled through film festivals. And what that kind of means is that once they've played at sessions ad nauseum at a film festival, there's not really much benefit to putting them on a season because they've been played out, because they're played potentially 100 sessions or something like that at say the French Film Festival. And if you're a cinema like us where you're not participating in the French Film Festival, you sort of say, well, okay, unless it's a really standout film that has a lot more audience appeal in it, a lot of those mid-level films really just don't have any more box office left in them. So you say, well, there's not really much point to me playing that, because at the end of the day, to put something on, you've got to take something off. And if I've got films like, say, Past Lives, which is a big hit and continues to screen, we're screening it since August, you don't want to take that film off, because that film's going to figure very strongly in the Academy Awards, which is 2.5 months away. And I want to make sure that I've got that movie on in, say, February, so that people who are finally catching up with it, because it's been nominated for 6 Oscars, that they've got a place where they can do that at the cinema. So the market has changed irrevocably, and we can't kind of try and pretend like it's the 90s or even the early 2000s, because there's so much shifted in terms of audience taste, audiences, and who's actually coming to the cinema, and the sort of films that are being bought for the Australian market, that trying to recreate, either 1999 or even 2010 is practically impossible. So I think, there's a very, very long answer to your question, Peter, but I suppose I'm just thinking about it very broadly for the first time myself. And I think, we're just last night, for instance, I was here and we had a Q&A screening of Poor Things, which opens on Boxing Day. And I was standing in the foyer with somebody from the studio, and we were just looking at the people that were coming through the foyer, not just for Poor Things, but all the other films we were playing. And the thing that we both observed to one another was how young they all were. They were all kind of, not all of them, but most of them were, say, 18 to 30. And it was very busy here. And that's a great thing. But they were seeing esoteric stuff. They were seeing the movies that I've talked about in the last a few minutes. But the thing is that it was a busy place. And I don't know that that necessarily is the case in a lot of venues that have sought to get back to, as I say, kind of pre-pandemic programming, where there was a much greater focus on the older demographic, because I think that the older demographic certainly hasn't come back in the same way that younger audiences have, particularly younger audiences who are looking to be challenged.
Look, excellent response, because it's such a difficult issue, of course, programming a cinema and selecting the right films and so on. And I must also commend you, because you also have a focus on Australian film and documentaries, which other cinemas are not necessarily keen on.
Yeah, it was interesting this year. I mean, I was chatting to somebody yesterday, and we were sort of looking back at the Australian marketplace and what had been put out by Australian producers, and with a few exceptions, it had been a pretty soft year in terms of Australian features, and certainly their performance at the box office. For us, I think by far and away the top grossing Australian film was Talk to Me, which was the horror film, very, very strong, fresh but visceral horror film, again appealing to that younger audience. That movie was probably one of the biggest Australian films of the year at the box office, not just here but everywhere. And then, of course, the other big hit was the John Farnham documentary, which didn't just play well here, but played, in the regions and in the suburbs, and an engaged audience, Australian audiences, many of whom hadn't come back to the theatre in a long time. So, I think there was a lesson in that, in as much as these movies were almost unabashed in the fact that they appealed strongly to audiences and audience tastes, rather than perhaps what the filmmaker might like to make a movie about. So, yeah, there was a lot of very worthy films, as I like to call them, that came along that dealt with some very interesting topics, but a lot of those topics were incredibly niche. And as a result, outside of perhaps a handful of films such as Talk to Me, or the John Farnham documentary, or the Kate Blanchett, Warwick Thornton film, The New Boy, perhaps struggled. There was a great documentary about Bob Brown called The Giants, which came out mid-year and had a very long life at the box office. We did very well with that, and obviously did very strongly in Tasmania as well. But perhaps, and also, we had some success with the Michael Gudinski documentary Ego, which premiered at the Melbourne International Film Festival. But that's just a handful of titles out of a lot of movies that really fell by the wayside, despite our best efforts. Because I think, they just, unfortunately, a lot of these films just weren't really interested in engaging with broader audience taste.
Okay, no, fair comment. And after all, it is a business, and you have to get people in there, into the cinemas to see the film. So I understand, yeah.
Yeah, I think the thing is, I'm not suggesting that everything needs to be a very accessible movie. We should always be challenging ourselves and audiences, and that's what we strive to do here too, with things that perhaps are outside of what they would normally see. But at the same time, though, I think there's kind of leading the audience with interesting and original material, and then there's also ignoring the audience and making movies that, what I kind of occasionally call sort of cinema therapy, where a filmmaker's kind of exorcising whatever personal demons or what have you they've got to kind of put it into a film, but they don't really give much thought to as to whether or not anybody else wants to watch it. So, sometimes those movies are fantastic, and they really strike a nerve, and break out, which is what we want, because ultimately we want Australian stories that people really engage with. But yeah, it's a very dark space that we're making the Australian scene is in at the moment. I can't think of an Australian comedy of the last sort of year that's really broken out. And yet, I always think that when we think about Australian cinema and the movies that we sort of hold up as reflections of ourselves, they tend to be comedies. So yeah, I'm not quite sure what that says about our national psyche or the psyche of our filmmakers at this time.
What an interesting analysis. I can appreciate that. We don't make many or good Australian comedies. Yeah, no, fair comment. And now we're almost approaching your list of best films, but I wanted to ask you one more thing. FOMO, tell me about the Nova expanding to East Brunswick.
Well, there's not many pockets of Melbourne that haven't been fully exploited, if you will, in terms of cinema opportunity. And we were very lucky that we had an opportunity to go into a new build, which is in Melbourne's inner north, in Brunswick East on Nicholson Street, at a brand new precinct which has been open for a year or so now, called East Brunswick Village. And what that is there's a sort of a small shopping centre with supermarkets and retail. And then in addition to that, there's the new Rumi, RUMI, which is a wonderful Middle Eastern restaurant that was previously located in sort of Lygon Street, further north, as well as Bridge Road Brewers. So it's kind of becoming a bit of a destination. But yeah, we were approached to look to open a new cinema there. And so we'll be opening that in middle of January, January 11. And what that'll do is it's much smaller than Nova. It's only six. I shouldn't say only, but it's 6 screens with a capacity for just under 400 people. And it'll look to bring perhaps some more commercial films to that market, movies that we don't necessarily always play here. The films that are that cater to the masses, but inevitably there'll always be a little bit of crossover titles, upscale films, as we'll be, of course, bringing some repertory cinema classics there as well. And what we're looking to do there is create an opportunity for people to combine two of Melbourne's greatest loves, which is food, which is fine food. We've got a kitchen there. We've got a head chef, and a kitchen team who will be preparing meals to order freshly, which will be available and ordered directly and delivered to your seat, as well as movies. So that's where the name comes from, Food Movies, FOMO, and it'll be opening very, very soon.
And did I hear you right when I think you said somewhere that the cost of the ticket will include food?
No, that's not quite right. No,
No?
I suppose where we'll be differentiating is that when people do go to the movies and they want to kind of have an opportunity to have something to eat outside of popcorn or Coke or an ice cream, they've got to go to Gold Class. And Gold Class, of course, is a premium experience where the price is, I think, around $45 in some cases, certainly for opening weekends for the bigger films. But the ticket price there will be standard, so effectively the same sort of pricing as you might find at Nova or surrounding theatres. So you'll be able to enjoy a movie in a cutting-edge, state-of-the-art environment with big screens, laser projection, 3D in some cases, 5.1 surround sound, beautiful new fresh seats, some recliners in the rear rows and the front rows, which will only be $1 more if you want to sort of lie back. But you won't have to pay that Gold Class price point if you do want to enjoy something more substantial with your movie.
Okay. Well, look forward to that. That's a terrific expansion for the Nova. So sounds great. Okay, it's time. What are your best films of the year, Kristian?
Look, it's been a great year for movies this year, Peter. And look, I always cheat in some respects when I answer this question because obviously I'm fortunate enough to see some films in advance, and I won't mention anything that opens after New Year's or from New Year's Day or later because there's some amazing films that I saw this year. Including at the Melbourne Film Festival, which opened in January. So I encourage people to look at January and not miss any of the great movies that are opening there. But the movies that the real standout for me is a movie that I think some people saw this week when we had some sold-out advanced screenings, is Poor Things, which opens on Boxing Day and stars Emma Stone and Mark Ruffalo and Willem Dafoe, and it is from director Yorgos Lanthimos. It's a wonderful fantasy adventure, quite unlike anything I think we've ever seen before. People who might be familiar with Lanthimos, who did The Favourite with Olivia Colman, who won Best Actress, or The Lobster or Killing of a Sacred Deer, knows that he's quite the original storyteller. This is his finest work to date and an absolute knockout. And I think is going to go all the way to the Academy Awards and be nominated for an enormous amount of Oscars. But that's my pick for the best film of the year. But look, just behind that, there's a couple of really great movies that I really enjoyed, two of which are also probably going to play a part in the Academy Awards, and that's Barbie and Oppenheimer. I think those two movies really surprised me just as much as they surprised everybody in terms of being completely beyond our wildest expectations in terms of entertainment and craft. So both of them were certainly very highly regarded by me. A movie I touched on earlier, Past Lives, debut feature by director Celine Song. Very heartfelt, beautifully told drama of kind of what if your life might have gone a different way, and just that sort of that a wonderful contemplation on the choices we make or the circumstances of our lives and how they might have gone a different way had life taken another route. So that's a very touching film that really stood out for me as well. And a movie that released a little earlier in the year that a lot of people might have forgotten about, but I thought was terrifically entertaining at the time, a film called Air, directed by Ben Affleck, of all things, about the creation of the Nike Air Jordan shoe. I didn't expect a movie about the making of a shoe to be quite as entertaining as that film was, but terrific script, great ensemble, and really, really entertaining film. Another movie I just want to touch upon, which opened a couple of days ago here, but perhaps hasn't really enjoyed quite the attention that it deserves, is the second feature from director Bradley Cooper, Maestro, starring Cooper and Carey Mulligan, about the composer. I always confuse his first name because I always think of Elmer Bernstein.
Leonard
Bernstein. Thank you very much. I always think of the composer rather. Don't get my composers confused. But yeah, Leonard Bernstein, absolutely incredible work. He's the real deal as a filmmaker, and I really, really got a lot out of Maestro. So yeah, don't let that one pass you by. That's certainly one to enjoy on the big screen.
That's a really good list. Is there any film, one or two perhaps, that disappointed you, that you thought would be better as films than they turned out to be?
Well, look, that's a really good question, Peter. I have a good sort of nose for avoiding things that are terrible. But perhaps, and I don't think I necessarily went in expecting this particular film to be any good. But it was horrible, and it will probably be really down there amongst the worst films of the year for me, and that would be the Fast and the Furious Part 10. I went along there because I had a ticket to the opening, and I regret it. It was pretty horrible, quite cartoonish and utterly unbelievable, but not in a good way. So yeah, that would probably have to have been one of the worst things for me this year. Thankfully, we didn't show it here in Carlton. But sometimes they always say you got to see the bad to know what the good actually is.
Fair point. In that film, if they had said family one more time, I would have been furious and would be fast out of there.
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't have been far behind you. Pretty rotten.
Okay, all fair enough. Now, I'm really intrigued to hear about the films coming up in January that you're looking forward to, January onwards, because I know there's going to be some really good releases coming up.
Yeah, it really is. It's quite a bonanza for people who enjoy quality cinema in January. I mean, I have to touch upon Coup de Chance, which I think you saw the other night here at Cinema Nova. A wonderful French comedy from Woody Allen, which opens on Boxing Day. Very enjoyable and a bit of a souffle, but in the best possible way. Another film that I really I must invite people to look out for is a film called The Holdovers, starring Paul Giamatti. Director Alexander Payne, who directed Giamatti in Sideways almost 20 years ago. It's a really, really heartwarming film, done in the style of a Hal Ashby film from the 1970s. So it's a bit of a throwback, but at the same time, utterly charming, and is certainly going to figure very strongly in the Academy Awards. So that's The Holdovers. I also really, really had a very, very soft spot for a film from director Andrew Haigh called All of Us Strangers, which is a very, very moving drama with a sort of a supernatural edge, which opens in January. That's about a man who was orphaned as a boy, who goes back to his childhood home and discovers his parents living as they were when they died when he was only 12, and so he gets to interact with them as an adult, and it's really very touching and very moving. So that's All of Us Strangers. Another film that I thought was an absolute knockout was Anatomy of a Fall, which won the Palme d'Or back in May. An absolutely riveting courtroom drama, and that's again also going to I think figure very strongly in the award season over the next couple of months, which starred German actress Sandra Hüller, who was in Tony Erdmann. People might remember that film a couple of years ago, which was she's really having an extraordinary time. She's also in another film called Zone of Interest, which opens in February. which is a very sort of chilling drama set in a household just on just outside the walls of Auschwitz during the Second World War. Yeah, she's having an extraordinary moment with two excellent performances in two very, very different but very, very exceptional films. Two exceptional films. Something a bit more lightweight, but certainly worth checking out is May December from director Todd Haynes, starring Natalie Portman and Julianne Moore. That is an absolute hoot. Probably Haynes' funniest film, sort of highly melodramatic, but in the best possible way, and it certainly knows what it is. All the performances in it, including a young up-and-comer by the name of Charles Melton, who's a strong contender for Academy Award consideration. It's about an actress who goes to meet a woman who she'll be portraying in a movie, a woman who got into a lot of hot water a couple of decades earlier when she wound up having an affair with a vastly younger man, and wound up becoming the focus of tabloids across America. So yeah, that is a really, really entertaining comedy drama that just manages to be so many genres at once, but manages to really knock it out of the park. So May, December, make sure you check that out when it opens on the 1st of February.
Terrific list of upcoming films and of your best films of this year, and updating the audience on everything Nova and the new cinemas coming up in East Brunswick in January. So sounds like all systems go at the Nova, and congratulations, Kristian Connelly.
Thank you very much, Petty. Cinema really seems to have come back with a bang this year. It's very, very exciting times, and I love this business of show.
Wonderful closing line. Thanks so much, Kristian, for talking with me.
All the best, Peter. Thank you.
Okay, all the best. Bye-bye.